guys, today I'm gonna do my wrap up for Booktube-A-Thon 2017. So Booktube-A-Thon was super successful for me. I finished 8 things in total. I read 5 novels, 2 audiobooks, and 1 graphic novel. And I vlogged the whole week. I did daily vlogs, so if you're interested, you can check these out. I'm first gonna talk about the challenges, then I'm gonna include some stats, and then I'm gonna talk about the books in chronological order and what I thought of them. I'm gonna leave a timestamp in the description because I know some people don't enjoy stats at all. So I'm gonna leave a timestamp to where I'm actually talking about my thoughts I have on these books. So let's talk about the challenges first. I did double up on a few, but for a lot of these I also have several answers, so I'm just gonna hold up whatever I finished first in that category. So the first challenge was a book with a person on the cover, for which I read Unconventional. Then we have a hype book, for which I finished The Winner's Curse. Read a book in one day, for which I also had Unconventional. Read a book with a character that's different from you, for which I read The Tiger's Watch. Read a book completely outdoors, for which I have The Invention of Hugo Cabret. Then we have a book you bought because of the cover, for which I also had The Winner's Curse. And the final challenge was to read 7 books, which I have accomplished. Okay, so now some stats. In this week, one of the books I read was historical fiction, 1 was fiction, 1 was contemporary, and 5 were fantasy. 3 were from the library or overdrive, 1 was new, 2 were used, and 2 were arcs. 1 book was by a male author, the other 7 were all by female authors. 3 of the books I read had female protagonists, 3 of the books that I read had male protagonists, 1 had an ensemble, and 1 was a non-binary protagonist. Alright, now let's go through it chronologically, and I'm gonna talk a bit about my thoughts. So the first book I finished was Unconventional by Maggie Harcourt, and I think this was actually my favorite book of the whole Booktube-A-Thon. This was really great. This is a YA contemporary, and it is about a girl whose father is managing several conventions every year, and the daughter is always there to help, and so we kind of follow a convention season. There is a romance in it, but it's also a lot about like fandom and how it makes you feel. I think it's a really great book. It was a lot of fun. It was very enjoyable. It was funny, but just also emotional in general. The only thing I was a little bit disappointed by was the romance. I think there could have been so much more done with it. It could have moved a little bit faster for my personal liking. I know that's very objective and a lot of people like it when it's slow, but I didn't really think that it had to take that long to get somewhere. But yeah, overall, I really loved it, and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Next, I finished the Half-Blood Prince audiobook, and I had already listened to half of it, so I didn't count this as a whole book. So Half-Blood Prince ended up being my least favorite out of all the Harry Potter books, and I really didn't expect it. I always thought that I just really enjoyed it. I thought it was like fast-paced and lots of things were happening, but there were not a lot of things happening, and it's actually kind of boring. Like, it was definitely my least favorite, and I actually ended up giving it only 4 stars in this reread, whereas before all of the books had 5 stars. So that's definitely an interesting development, but I'm gonna do a whole video on my experience rereading these books for the first time, where I'm gonna talk a bit more about the book and how it kind of ranks in comparison to the other ones and stuff like that. Then I finished The Winner's Curse by Marie Rudkowski. You have probably heard so many things about this book. I am late to the party, but I am finally in the party, although I am not enjoying the party as much as other people do. I think this is definitely an enjoyable read, but I just don't really think that I will continue with the series. I just wasn't invested enough with any of the characters or the romance in it, so I don't really feel like I'm interested to see where any of this is going. I still feel a little bit iffy about the kind of slave aspect of this. I think that portraying a romance between a slave and their owner is definitely very complicated, and I think it's something that white people shouldn't really talk about. So yeah, I gave The Winner's Curse a 3 out of 5 stars. Then I finished The Invention of Hugo Cabret by Brian Selznick. I really enjoyed it. It's not something that I would normally pick up, but that made it all the more enjoyable because it was like a very different read for me, and I think overall it's definitely a really great story. I think the storytelling is really nice, and I liked how the story kind of came full circle at the end. I definitely think it's worth the read if you haven't already read this. I'm definitely interested to check out more by Brian Selznick, and I gave The Invention of Hugo Cabret 3.5 out of 5 stars. Then I read The Tiger's Watch by Julia Ember. I received an arc of this through NetGalley, so there's gonna be a full review up on this somewhere in August. This is a YA fantasy, and the protagonist is gender fluid. I have a little bit of a hard time describing the plot because it's very complicated and the world building is kind of complex, but I think the kind of main element is that the main character Tashi has a connection to an animal, like they have bonded with this animal so they can kind of read each other's thoughts and can see through their eyes, and I think that's the kind of main element of the story, and that's kind of the element that I really liked most about the story. As I said, I think that the world building was overall a little bit too complex. There were lots of things that I didn't really understand about it. I didn't really understand, like, there was a war kind of going on, and I didn't really understand where that whole war was coming from. I think that what we got on the world was good, but I really wish we got a little bit more on the history and how this all started, and I think then it would have been a little bit easier to understand. But overall, I definitely think this book was very enjoyable. I can't really say anything as far as the gender fluid representation goes, as I am a cis woman. From my perspective, a few of the things that were done well is that it was mentioned in the first 5% that Tashi identifies as non-binary, and also while there was some misgendering happening in the beginning, as soon as Tashi told people that they use they/them pronouns, this was always respected and never used in any evil way by a villain or an opposing side, and I think that's good. But obviously, I always encourage you to check out On Voices reviews. If I can find any, I will definitely leave them in the description down below. I gave The Tiger's Watch 3 out of 5 stars. Then I finished Behind the Song. This is an anthology edited by K.M. Walton. I am not sure what I want to say about this. I don't even know how to describe it, because I thought this was an anthology that had to do with music, like where every story and essay would be about music and how music can influence you, can inspire you, how it can make you feel different emotions, but it's really just an anthology where every essay or short story has a song and is inspired by that song, but that doesn't mean that the song or music in general is in the story itself. And so I overall wasn't really a big fan of this. I did find myself enjoying a lot of the essays because they either focused on the author talking about music or a certain song and how that made them feel, or it was by a songwriter or a musician talking about how they made a song and how this kind of influenced their career. And so I ended up enjoying all of the essays a lot. I think I gave all of them 3 or more stars. As far as the short stories go, there were really only 2 that I enjoyed. I think the rest of them were just super weird, and I think there was not enough of a connecting point to music and also sometimes to the songs that these stories were inspired by. I just felt really weirded out by a lot of these stories. There's some trigger warnings as well, but I'm also gonna upload a whole review of this where I will also have my individual ratings for all of the short stories and essays. Overall, adding all of my ratings, I did give this a 3 out of 5 stars, but it feels more like a 2.5. Then I read Traveler by L.E. Delano. This is one of my most anticipated releases of the year. This is a YA fantasy about a girl who can travel through different dimensions. I felt so underwhelmed by this book. I was really looking forward to it. It has a gorgeous cover, has a really interesting premise, and it just completely fell flat for me personally. The author definitely had an interesting idea for the world building, but I just think that some of the aspects of how the character travels and what happens to her in her own dimension were just too complicated, and that led to there being a lot of plot holes. And I'm not usually one who notices plot holes, but it was very apparent in the beginning, and just lots of things where if you really started thinking about it, they didn't really make sense. I was kind of hoping for the romance to be great and really swoony. I mean, this is by Swoon Reads, so I was expecting a lot, but that was actually my least favorite part. I think the romance was not well done at all, and if you know me, you know I am always a romance lover. I rarely not enjoy a romance, like even if it's cheesy and even if it's insta love, I still somehow find myself enjoying them for the most part. This one I was not enjoying at all, to be honest. I just don't think that it was a good development. It wasn't even insta-love. I mean, the characters do spend a lot of time together, but you can't really read the feelings they have for each other. You rarely hear the main character talk about her feelings for the character. And then also because they sometimes meet each other in different dimensions and they have different histories together. One of them has different feelings and a different history and a different background with the other. And it's just, yeah, that's where it's getting complicated. So it wasn't like the romance wasn't justified. It's not like it didn't make sense. It's just that I, as a reader, need to have more of a development. I need to have the character thinking about it. I need to have the character develop the feelings. And I just don't think that it was on the page. And so I didn't end up enjoying it, and I gave it 2 out of 5 stars. And finally, in Booktube-A-Thon, I finished the Deathly Hallows audiobook. This was an experience. I have to say, Deathly Hallows was a lot less interesting and action-packed than I had remembered it. I really think the first half is actually kind of boring. Like, nothing happens. It's just Ron being a pain in the ass, and I just really didn't like Deathly Hallows as much as I thought I would. I think even the Battle of Hogwarts was a little bit underwhelming. I did like it more than I liked Half-Blood Prince, but I also ended up only giving this 4 out of 5 stars, whereas before this was a very clear 5 stars. I'm also pretty sure this was like my number 2 in my ranking before. That definitely changed, but this is also something that I'm going to talk a little bit more in detail about in my Harry Potter video. I also DNF'd one book simply because I couldn't really get into it, and that was The Rising by Tara Harmony. I added the 38 pages of this to my total page goal. I also started another book that was Freak of Nature by Julia Crane, and I got 107 pages into this, and then I also started another audiobook, and I think I read 2.5 hours of this before Booktube-A-Thon was over. So that means I listened to a total of 36 hours, although a lot of the time I listen to audiobooks on 1.5 speed, so it's more like 24 hours, but that's still a lot of hours that I listened to an audiobook this week. I mean, it's a full day. That's crazy. My total pages that I read in this week were 2,309 pages, which means that I read an average of 329 pages every day. A good chunk of this comes definitely down to The Invention of Hugo Cabret, because it is a graphic novel and I went through it really quickly, but I am just so wowed by this whole progress. I am so happy with this week, even if I read some books that I didn't enjoy as much. Overall, I was really, really happy, and because I was just able to go through these books quickly, even if I didn't enjoy one too much, at least I am done with that now. And I'm just so happy. Booktube-A-Thon was so great. Let me know how your Booktube-A-Thon went. Did you complete all of the challenges? How many pages did you read? What was your favorite book? And thank you so much for watching. I'll see you soon. Bye!